Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the December 19th, 2011 Washougal City Council meeting and ask you to please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Poston.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Present.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Present.
Councilmember Delabar.
Present.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember Morris.
Here.
And Councilmember Russell.
We did have a note from John that he would be out of town this evening.
I ask unanimous consent that Councilman Russell be excused.
Hearing no objection, so ordered. I know that we have one amendment to the agenda this evening. Immediately after new business, we'll be inserting a new item number 9 for an executive session, short in duration in regards to labor negotiations with action to follow. Are there any other amendments to the agenda? Okay. Rose, do we have any correspondence this evening? We're at that point in the agenda for any comments from the public. Anyone from the public that would like to address council this evening? Mr. Olson.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name's Harvey Olson, 3903 R Street. Just got back from my annual vacation, 80-degree weather. Caught a cold on the plane coming back. First paper of the second newspaper I opened, read an article concerning the incident where a police officer responding to a house fire was greeted with gunfire. And the firefighters arrived. The gunfire prevented them from extinguishing the fire. No injury for police or fire personnel, according to the paper, and I just double-checked with both chiefs. They said the same thing. Now, this reaffirms that police officers, firefighters have an occupation that when they go to work, they do not know if while working they'll be injured slightly, a lot, go to the hospital, go home uninjured, or to a morgue and a body bag. They never know. Big town, it happens. Little towns, you don't expect that to happen, but by golly, it happened here. And with the proper training, good supervision, leadership, they prevailed. Now, back a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, Councilman Shoemaker presented a resolution, and it was passed by the City Council, that recognition to our police and fire departments every year on 9/11 be observed. I believe our first responders deserve this recognition 365 days a year from all the citizens, occupants of Washougal, every day. They do a great job. We all should be proud of them. And I want to thank Councilman Shoemaker for your efforts to get that resolution passed. I know you've been shot at more than once. I know I have. And it's not fun, and it can happen in a small city. And thank you, council members, for passing that resolution honoring the first responders. Thank you for your time, Mayor.
Thank you, Harvey. Are there any other members of the public wishing to address council? Don't be shy. Good evening, Mrs. Terrell.
Good evening. I'm Marilyn Tyrrell. I live at 950 G Street. First of all, I want to thank for your service, for your wonderful service, for the many hours you've given us the people who are leaving tonight. Every time I hear a fire engine, I think of you. And every time I know of good work, I think of you, and I'm sorry to see you go. At the end of this year, things change at the new year, and one request that I would have to make is that the public comments at the end go before council, oh, they are down, go after council comments. When the council has done its work for the evening and we have been here observing, it would be, I think, important for the public to be able to refer and comment on what has been said that evening, especially toward the end. And I would like you to consider that, please.
Okay. Thank you, Marilyn. Michael.
Good evening. My name is Michael Rothschild. I live at 736 Sunset Ridge Drive in Washougal. And thank you for allowing me to speak again tonight. And I'd like to also thank the 3 city council members who it'll be their last evening, and I wish you all the best of luck. I know you've done your best in your jobs here. I would also like to speak about this case that I imagine everybody in this room knows about, this murder-suicide that just happened in our city on December 7th. Stephen Stanberry, who ended up, unfortunately, killing 4 dogs, his wife and sister-in-law, and caused all kinds of havoc for the whole community. Just to start out, this happened, of course, on 3275 F Place in Washougal. Just to start out, I read what I could to find out about the background and some aspects about the story. According to the Post-Record paper, the Washington police had this person under investigation for multiple sex crimes. A day before the incident on which happened, of course, on December 7th, Washougal detectives had arranged for Stanberry to turn himself in to the police on Thursday, which, of course, would have been a day after this tragedy happened. According to the Columbian newspaper, on December 14th, he was wanted for sex crimes, allegedly molested and raped a girl who lived in his house over several years, starting when she was 9 years old. Turns out, as I read, she turned out to be his stepdaughter. The charge was going to be suspicion of first-degree rape of a child and first-degree child molestation. And then I found out that he was asked to through his attorney, asked to turn himself in on December 8th, which I was just mystified about this. I don't know if this is a policy or somebody had a mistake regarding this. I really don't know at this point. I'm kind of curious if anybody has an explanation about this. I would sure like to know about it. If it is a policy, it just seems to me that anybody who's wanted for violent sexual crime, which this was, I think most people would agree, rape, especially of a child, is a very violent crime. I don't know why someone would be given the opportunity to turn himself in. Of course, the person could either escape or do something crazy like what he did. I doubt that it's just a coincidence that he did this knowing that he was supposed to turn himself in for these serious crimes the next day. I read in the paper yesterday in the Columbian that Marianne's Glass Store, they arrested a person in there who was asleep because they found marijuana in the store, and they arrested him. I just find it kind of strange they'd arrest him for this, for being asleep in the store, and yet this guy wasn't arrested for these horrible, violent crimes of rape. This Stanberry person. So I'll take my seat, and if anybody has any explanation, I'd like to know, and I'll pass on the information to others, because I've talked to several other people in our community who are also very upset about this, just knowing that this person was given the opportunity to turn himself in, and then look what happened the day before he was supposed to turn himself in. So anyway, I'll take my seat, and just want to end it by saying, you know, Merry Christmas to everybody in this room, and Happy New Year, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. I know, and certainly give Chief Mitchell an opportunity to comment on both parts. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago at this meeting, or last week, that it's probably best that we leave those items that deal with law enforcement to the law enforcement professionals to handle. I think it's probably fair to say that there are more arranged turnings of oneself in than we probably want to know about across the board for many different things. But in fact, I believe the investigation from the standpoint of the city and from all the individuals involved was certainly also at the mercy of the Child Protective Services and the county prosecutors, who, to some degree, pretty much gave us a course of action to follow. So while it's easy to second guess what happened in different things, to have been involved in it from day one and know what the steps were, and to be following those as you're put forth to do from the individuals who in the end will be prosecuting those cases, is certainly something that we probably can't second guess to any large degree. In regards to the Mary Jane's House of Glass, I don't believe the individual was arrested for sleeping. I believe the individual was arrested for felony possession of marijuana. So we would have a hard time as we walked in there at the behest of a customer who found some suspicious circumstances not to walk in and find somebody there in possession of that amount of marijuana and let them go. So that arrest is I think was probably an easy one. Chief, anything that you want to add to either?
I guess I wanted to say that we are actually working in conjunction with the prosecutor's office, and this was a long, involved case, and I don't think obviously anybody knew, you know, how this would turn out. I guess, you know, it's fair to say for myself that had we had gone in to try and arrest him, the mindset that he had, probably the outcome would have been the same, only we probably would have had a couple of officers that were killed in trying to arrest him. I think he made his mind up that he was going to go to jail, so I mean, I can't speak for the deceased, but I strongly feel that the outcome would have been much worse had we gone in and tried to effect an arrest. And I guess all I can say is there was really no indication from previous contacts with him of his violent nature. So I think that's about all.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, any other members of the public wishing to address council? Hi, Katya.
Hi, Katya Delavar, 2149 39th Street, Washougal. I wanted to, as the wife of a council member, I wanted to thank all of you for stepping up to office. It's not easy. I mean, we all live it every day trying to help out, and it's a really amazing job that you guys do for not much money. So thank you for what all of you do, and thank you to my husband for dedicating so much time to make the notion of limiting our government to certain rules so that we don't have to live in a oppressive world. And just basically I wanted to thank you guys, and this is an emotional day for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Katya. Are there any other members of the public? Yes, Barbara.
I just want to thank the city. Barbara Curry, 303 Love Street, Apartment 4. I want to thank the city. I haven't personally seen it or touched it or whatever myself, but in an effort to make the area safe in front of Mr. Anderson's home, the city has strung a tape of some kind from the top pole at the top of the steps that are there to the bottom railing that he has on his lawn until a railing has been put in place. And I just want to thank the city for their concerns and thank them for making sure that there's a safety thing put in there so that he can go up and down and get his mail and not fall down the steps and be free to move about. And I also want to thank the council members that are leaving office for their work that they have done and congratulate them on the things that they have done and encourage the new people who will be coming in to just take your time and be ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Anyone else that would like to address council this evening? Mike?
Mayor, is there another time for public to speak, or is this pretty much it?
No, there is a second part of the agenda that will have public comments as well. Okay, seeing no other individuals at this time, we will go on to the consent agenda. This evening, the consent agenda before council has 16 items on it. City Council minutes of December 5, 2011. Workshop minutes of December 12th, 2011. Regular accounts payable claims in the amount of $1,118,456.58. Agenda Bill 14711, a suspension of the council rules in cancellation of the workshop meeting of December 27th, 2011. Agenda Bill 14811, a professional services agreement with Wallace Engineering for general engineering for community development. Agenda Bill 14911, a supplemental professional services agreement number 3 with Parsons Brinkerhoff for the Transportation Capital Facilities Plan. Agenda Bill 15011, a professional services agreement with Wallace Engineering for general engineering for public works. Agenda Bill 15111, Washington State Department of Commerce Energy Office Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant Contract Amendment. Agenda Bill 15211, a supplemental professional services agreement with S&S Janitorial Services for 2012. Agenda Bill 15311, a supplemental professional services agreement with Wallace Engineering for the E Street Improvements Project. Agenda Bill 15411, a supplemental professional services agreement with Wallace Engineering for the Zone 4 Reservoir Improvements Project. Agenda Bill 15511, a supplemental professional services agreement with PB Americas for the conceptual design of State Route 14 and 27th Street Extension. Agenda Bill 15611, a professional services agreement with the Columbia River Economic Development Council for economic development. Agenda Bill 15711, a professional services agreement with the Humane Society of Southwest Washington. Agenda Bill 15811, a professional services agreement with the West Columbia Gorge Humane Society. And Agenda Bill 15911, a contract and purchase order with Western Display Fireworks for 2012.
Mr. Mayor, I request that items number 4 and 13 be pulled from the consent agenda.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to pull items 15 and 16 for discussion, please.
Okay. Any other items? Okay. So your consent agenda now consists of items number 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 14.
I'm sorry, 2 was pulled also?
No.
You skipped over 2 up there.
Sorry. 2 is included.
So, Mr. Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that we pass the consent agenda consisting of items number 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 14.
Hearing no objection, so ordered. Item number 4, Agenda Bill 14711, a suspension of council rules and cancellation of the workshop meeting of December 27th, 2011. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The item before you is a suspension of your rules at section, at section 2.4, where you prescribe that you'll meet on the 2nd and 4th Mondays of each month in workshop. And pursuant to your authority in your rules at section 10.1, you may suspend those rules. And so the action before you is to suspend your rules and then to cancel your workshop meeting regularly scheduled for December 27th.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we suspend the council rules and cancel the workshop meeting for December 27th, 2011.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to suspend the council rules and cancel the workshop meeting of December 27th, 2011. Council
Mayor?
discussion. Michael?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason I asked for this to be pulled and actually have a vote on it was so that it would be brought to the public's attention that there will be no workshop next week and that we are complying with our rules. I know we have standing rules that have certain meetings, and we're suspending those rules, canceling the meeting, and yeah, if you show up, you'll be alone.
Any other council comment, council questions? Okay, I've got a motion and a second to suspend council rules and cancel the workshop meeting for December 27th, 2011. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And Agenda Bill 15611, a professional services agreement with CREDC to promote economic development. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This item is a professional services agreement with the Columbia River Economic Development Council. It is very similar to our agreement from last year. The expenditure is $5,000. It's been appropriated in the budget pursuant to your previous action on the budget, and the recommended action is to authorize the mayor to sign the professional services agreement.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we authorize the mayor to sign the professional services agreement with the Columbia River Economic Development Council.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to sign the PSA with the CREDC. Council discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Michael?
Mr. Mayor and Council, the reason why I asked for this agenda item to be pulled is because I believe that philosophically, that it's inappropriate for government or its instruments to determine winners and losers in the marketplace. And as such, I see that the work of the CREDC, even though it can have some good successes, will create potentially some winners and ignore some others businesses which could have used that attention as well. So for that reason, I'll be voting against it.
Okay, any other council discussion? Okay, I've got a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to sign the PSA with CREDC. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
Roll call.
Councilmember Wilson,
Aye.
Councilmember Schaefer,
No.
Councilmember McDaniel,
Aye.
Councilmember Delbar,
No.
Councilmember Greenlee,
Aye.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye. Okay, motion carries. And Agenda Bill 15811, a professional services agreement with the West Columbia Gorge Humane Society. David?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Before you is a professional services agreement for dog impound boarding and care services in support of our animal control program. The recommended action is to authorize the mayor to sign the professional services agreement. Funds for this professional services agreement are included in your approval of the 2012 budget.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we authorize the mayor to sign the professional services agreement with West Columbia Gorge Humane Society.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to sign the professional services agreement with the West Columbia Gorge Humane Society. Council discussion. David?
Mr. Mayor, I understand, I think I understand from this information that was provided, the city is providing to West Columbia Gorge Humane Society a building maintenance, utilities, and is there anything else that we're providing there?
I believe that's the bulk of what we provide, whether regardless who's carrying out the contract, yes.
Okay. And my question would then be, do we provide such support to Southwest Washington for their contract?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet. Any other questions, comments?
Yes,
Jennifer?
I would just like to say that I'm very pleased to see that the city and the Humane Society are working together and communicating toward a mutually satisfactory agreement. This pleases me very much, and I will be voting to approve this tonight.
Thank you. Any other council members?
Mr. Mayor.
Michael?
Earlier tonight, in the consent agenda, we passed the agreement with Southwest Washington Humane Society. And if I understand correctly, both that contract as well as the contract that's currently moved have roughly the same reimbursement per dog. And so it's roughly the same contract. I know there's a tiny bit of differences. That about correct?
Mm-hmm.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other council comments? Okay, I've got a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to sign the professional services agreement with the West Columbia Gorge Humane Society. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No?
Motion carries. And Agenda Bill 15911, a contract and purchase order with Western Display Fireworks. Dave, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I'm going to take that one. Thank you, Mayor. Council, this item is a contract and purchase order with Western Display Fireworks, the firm from whom we've obtained our fireworks recently. They advised us a couple of weeks ago or so that costs for next year's show, for the exact same show that we had last year for next year, would be going up potentially relatively significantly due to some different issues in China related to labor and producing the fireworks. However, they have a stock on hand, and so they've been contacting their customers with 2011 rates to offer that stock on hand to us so that we could take advantage of pricing that won't go up. We talked about this at your workshop last week, and the recommended action is to authorize the mayor to sign the contract and purchase order.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we authorize the mayor to sign the contract and purchase order with Western Display Fireworks.
Second?
We've got a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to sign the attached contract and purchase order with Western Display Fireworks. Council discussion. Dave? Dave?
Well, I'm glad the Hotel Motel Tax Committee decided to encourage tourism, and the only question I've got is, do we know if this works?
In terms of encouraging tourism?
Yes.
I believe we had a relatively successful show this last 4th of July. It was my second one, I guess. There were lots of folks down there. So I think it is successful in attracting energy and enthusiasm and getting folks to come in. I think we would like it to be even more successful.
Do we have any feel for the business that it brings to town?
I'm not aware of any specific analysis that's been done to look at that particular day or the day immediately before or after to see if there's a bump that could be directly attributable to that.
How does the business community regard it?
Well,
are they happy with this?
Those that are on the advisory committee certainly are, and they voted in favor of this. Those are lodging businesses primarily, as well as the chamber has been involved, and they represent broad commercial interests, and I think their support would be indicative that they think that this is an appropriate use of those funds.
Got it. Thank you.
Paul?
I just wanted to say that Western Display Fireworks has been doing our fireworks show for all the time that I've been on council, and which is, what, 4 years now. And they've been easy to work with. I think they put on a great show. The change of venue last year from Cottonwood Beach to the port, I think was very successful. And I think they made that change also without any difficulty. So this is a pretty good vendor.
Any other council comments, questions? Okay, I've got a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to sign the attached contract and purchase order with Western Display Fireworks. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, on to new business items. Agenda Bill 160-11, a resolution to amend Chapter 2A, compensation of department heads and other non-represented employees, including Exhibit A, the 2012 salary table, and Chapter 19.02, educational programs and tuition reimbursement. Mrs. Cefalo.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council. The 2012 budget included 3 adjustments to 2A of our personnel policies that discuss compensation for department heads and other non-represented employees. The first change is to increase the employee monthly contribution from a minimum amount of 15 to a maximum of 100 for the health insurance. The second is to include a new police position titled Police Commander. This was formerly reviewed as a police captain, and an increase adjustment to the salary schedule Exhibit A by 1%. The second item, Chapter 1902 of our personnel policies that discusses educational programs and tuition reimbursement, has been amended to include criteria that address the reimbursement schedule, eligibility requirements, application procedure, and payback provisions. The recommended action is to read the resolution by title only, pass, post, the resolution in the usual manner.
Mr. Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that we read the resolution by title only.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
A resolution amending portions of the Compensation Department Heads and Other Non-Represented Employees Manual related to health insurance monthly contributions, increasing the salary schedule contained in Exhibit A by 1%, adding the position of Police Commander in Section 2A of the manual, and also amending Washougal personnel policies with regard to educational programs and tuition reimbursement.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we pass and post the resolution in the usual manner.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to pass and post the resolution in the usual manner. Council discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Michael?
Do we have any idea what the trends are in the private sector with regards to tuition reimbursement? Because my understanding is that's declining as far as a common practice.
I can speak from my own experience, but that's going back about 5 years. Typically, the private sector will use as a bar similar to what's been proposed here, where you use in the state college, and then if an employee chooses to go to a private school, then they will pay a difference or a portion, if you will, for that private tuition relative to the to what the state would cost, state school.
But specifically, my understanding is that several companies are cutting this privilege and this perk. And do you have any estimate about how many or how much percentage is being cut out there, or how much it's being kept?
I don't. I have not done that research. I did do research on the public sector and looking at comparable cities. And certainly, again, what's been proposed here and a lot of the language that I've embedded into the policy has been leveraged from other jurisdictions that have similar processes and procedures in place.
Right. The thing that concerns me about it is that there aren't that many opportunities in a city this size for advancement, if I understand correctly. I might be speaking out of turn there. But for a person to take advantage of this and become more eligible for a higher rank or higher position within the company, it would seem like we're basically priming them to get a job elsewhere. And I understand that there's a provision that allows for payback, or for them to reimburse the city within 1 year or 2 years, two different pay schedules with that. But that concerns me a little bit is at a time when we're tightening the belt, to have this still be part of our compensation package.
I don't know that I would agree with the notion that we don't have places for advancement. Both of our chiefs sitting here in the room came up through the ranks. Our community development director, who's on interim assignment, came up through the ranks. Our public works director, who's on interim assignment, came up through the ranks. Mr. Dennis come through the ranks. Mr. Knipes come through the ranks. Who else? Rose has come up through the ranks. I would venture to say that we very much encourage our employees to stay at the top of their games and in their educational status as they can, so that as those positions open, I think it is, I'll be cautious on this one, I think it's always a case where smaller jurisdictions sometimes may tend to be training grounds for larger jurisdictions as well. You know, two good cases of point that are still relevant here. Marty Snell, that started out in our community development, went from the city of Washougal to the city of Camas, and is now the community development planning director over the entire department for the county.
Eric Holmes.
Eric Holmes at the city of Vancouver, the new city manager there, started out here, went to Battleground, went into the private sector, and then to Vancouver as well. So there certainly is always going to be turnover no matter where in the ranks, but I believe our practice, most certainly in the last 2 years, is to look at everybody in-house that we can as those positions may open. And I think in the last change in any of our management, upper management, and/or those in between there, we've held true to that as well. Other council questions? Molly?
It would seem like this is a fairly popular program, is that correct?
Yes, it hasn't been fully utilized, obviously, in the last few years because of the budget. And again, even going forward, it would be budget dependent and obviously council approval with the budget as to what we can do with the program. I think more importantly is this policy now is a lot tighter than it has been, and we've got some very specific criteria and process and procedure that was obviously missing from our current policy.
I mean, that was the point I was going to make, because we've discussed this in the workshop, that the policy before us tonight is much tighter than it was before. And so for that reason, and the fact that we do have a number of employees who have utilized it, and our department heads or interim department heads, I will definitely be voting in favor. Thank you.
Any other council questions, comments? Okay, I've got a motion and a second to pass and post the resolution in the usual manner. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. That brings us to Agenda Bill 16111, an interlocal agreement with the City of Camas for CTRAN and RT Regional Transportation Council Board assignments. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, I'll call your attention to the hard copy of a document that I emailed out a little bit earlier today. I hope that you all have a copy of that. If you didn't have a chance to read through the email that I sent earlier, I'll just walk through that briefly. But this item is a second iteration of a proposed interlocal agreement between ourselves and the City of Camas regarding our joint representation on both the CTRAN and the RTC boards. As you know, we've been working on this over the last period of time to try to come to an acceptable agreement that will provide some consistency and predictability around how our joint representation is prescribed, and institute a cycle, if you would, that is regular in nature. It also seeks to speak to the fact that we are jointly represented and that we are two different communities, and that we are in partnership in that representation, and that a member from one council is working on behalf of and representing both councils. You saw the first draft of this interlocal agreement at a workshop, and at that time expressed your comfort with the language and anticipated comments from Camas, and were anxious to know what they felt. They were able to review that, and just late last week we received proposed revisions from them, which are included in the current proposal that's in front of you, and I'll just walk through those very briefly. The first one was in Section 4, Item D. This is where the original agreement provided complete deference to one council, that being the council that was making an appointment to either the primary seat for a board or to the alternate seat for the other board. And when it was your rotation, the first proposal would have provided for complete deference to the other council for that appointment. Camas's feedback and proposal back is that there be a ratification process, if you would, where the council with the primary seat would make that appointment and then send it over to your colleague council, and that they would ratify it. So the language there seeks to prescribe that. The same thing would happen for the alternate. In section E, very minor change there, just to point out to the fact that sometimes we carry into the early in the calendar year to get the appointments finished up, and so we just wanted to make sure that there was that flexibility. And then the last change that they it's not the last change that they proposed, but it's the last change that's incorporated into this draft, is a brand new section, Roman numeral 5, called Representatives' Duties. As you read through that, this is where the agreement would seek to acknowledge and recognize that there's joint representation here, and that there are two groups, and that it would be a duty of a representative to fairly and accurately represent the consensus views of the two cities. So it acknowledges that, but it doesn't prescribe how that would happen. It just acknowledges that there'd be many ways that that could happen. It does get very specific, though, in the next paragraph to say that if there is a disagreement between the cities on any item before the board, that disagreement being discerned from the activities of the representative in working with the two councils, that the representative would be required to abstain from voting on that issue because we essentially had a disagreement between the two communities. So the effect of that would be there wouldn't be a vote of the representative of the two cities because the two cities were not in agreement on the issue, but that there'd be an explanation given to whichever board was considering the matter that provided all of the information. Anticipating that there could come a time that disagreement would gel to a point where there was the possibility that a representative be removed, and it says specifically failure to accurately reflect the will of the constituent councils, that a vote of the combined councils, which is 14 members, could happen, and that depending on it being a majority or as an option a 2/3 majority, there would be a removal of the representative. I suppose that parallels what's somewhat prescripted in that second paragraph. Those are the changes that were proposed by Camas that we incorporated into this draft. There was one other change that I mentioned in my email, which was around the concept that you may be familiar with new boards and new committees where you don't start everybody off on a 4-year term or a 2-year term. Maybe half the group starts on a 2-year term and the other half starts on a 4, so that you end up with a staggered process. I think that's an outstanding notion to contemplate. We just simply couldn't figure out the mechanics of how to make that work so that we would still alternate the seats, and so didn't advance anything along those lines into this iteration, but certainly are willing to figure that out at a future date if it is something that we could figure out. I don't believe that this item is on the agenda in Camas this evening. I looked at the agenda and spoke with Lloyd, and I did not see it. I'm not aware that it's on the agenda. That doesn't mean that it couldn't come up and that they couldn't deliberate, but I'm not aware that they are going to. They'll meet on the 3rd, as you know, and they have a workshop on the 3rd as well as their meeting. So there's a number of options for the council tonight. One option would be to consider these proposed changes and to take action to approve it as you see it here, and we would forward that information to the Camas Council for their consideration and potential action on the 3rd, and then we would have an agreement, and then we would implement the agreement so that we could get these appointments taken care of. We could probably do that on the same night as well, or they could do that on the same night since you've already acted to make your 2 appointments. We'd have to wait probably till the 17th for them to send us theirs for our ratification. After some deliberation now, you could, through me, get some feedback back to Camas, and we could work through another iteration where they would meet on the 3rd and then we'd be meeting on the 17th. Workshop the week prior on the 9th, I believe it is. Or you could table consideration to a time, delay consideration at all to a future meeting and not have any deliberations and not give any feedback at this time. I would, just as a staff recommendation, if you were comfortable with this language, to take action tonight. If not, to give some feedback. I think your colleagues in Camas would appreciate any feedback that you have for your first initial reactions, and then as we consider it at a future point, if that's the direction you head, we certainly could give that feedback. I did want to pass on that Councilman Russell did communicate with me by email late this afternoon in response to the email that I sent. And he had 2 comments. He wanted to make sure that I passed those along to you. The first was that he had a question, and the question was, what if a council doesn't ratify the appointment of the other council? And I think he's hit on the crux issue here, as we would have a situation where the current appointee would continue to serve until such time that there was a consensus appointment. And so it would continue to iterate until that happened under the language that's proposed here. And then the other was just to let you know that he liked the idea of a 2/3 majority on that particular item, feeling that represented the significance of what that type of action would represent. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or consider your deliberation.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to authorize the mayor to sign the interlocal agreement with the city of Camas. After I read this, I think it's taken care of the things that we had talked about in the past.
I'll second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to sign the interlocal agreement with the city of Camas. Council discussion. Jennifer?
Yes, actually, Mr. Mayor, since this agreement was not included in our packets, and this is the first we've seen this version with the proposed revisions, I actually think we need some time to review it further, and I move to table this item for further discussion at our next workshop.
Second?
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to table the item to our next workshop. All those in favor?
Aye.
Discussion, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm sorry, there's no discussion of a motion to table.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Roll call?
Councilmember Poston,
Nay.
Councilmember Shoemaker,
Aye.
Councilmember McDaniel,
Aye.
Councilmember Delavar,
Aye.
Councilmember Greenlee,
Nay.
Councilmember Morris.
Nay.
Got a 3-3 tie. Mayor votes no for the moment to table and reopens the item for discussion. David?
Voting tonight on this issue means that a lame duck council could impose on the new council, which gets seated in January, a solution that may not be acceptable to the new council. The new council reflects a changing consensus among the electorate that should be reflected in that decision. To do that requires a delay until the new council is seated. In fairness, I think that we should delay this thing, especially since Mr. Russell isn't here to vote on it tonight. And I know that he feels strongly about this, as indicated in his emails. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And by the way, if I've got a problem with procedure, I'd appreciate hearing it from you.
Understood.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
Yes, actually. With all due respect to my colleagues in Camas, I actually disagree with these proposed changes. I do not agree with taking away an individual's vote, asking someone to abstain. For many years, we've had council members serving on these boards, and I may have disagreed with how they voted on issues, but I never would have asked them to abstain because that's their opinion, and Councilmember Poston as well as Councilmember Dietzman have served honorably over the years, and I just think I don't agree with it. I think it's disrespectful. It's calling into question the individual's judgment, and my second problem is the 3-year time frame. How did we come up with a 3-year time frame?
Nothing specific, no specific analysis. It just seemed like a tenure that would be a workable tenure for somebody to get up to speed in the first year, in the second year, becoming fully effective, and then enjoying a third year so that that board could enjoy a fully effective member for maybe a couple of years. I think that was really the depth of the analysis. There was no specific magic to that. We had talked about a longer period of time in terms of continuity and the notion that maybe the effectiveness of the member fully embedded in the issues over time is productive for a board. But I don't know that Camas is wed to that 3-year term. I think Lloyd and I proposed it, and that's where it is right now.
In the first draft of the agreement, the one that was approved here, that same 3-year was in there, correct?
Yes, the 3 years is in there, and also want to just remind the council along these same lines that it's not automatic, but there is a provision that would provide for the mutual agreement of both councils to push that to a 4th year if a specific representative was moving through the leadership positions on a board. We've seen that request come from other members of those boards, that continuity is helpful when someone is going to move through the leadership positions, and it might take 4 years to do that. And then it also has language that says, unless mutually agreed otherwise to
Right.
any of that.
Right.
So it could be shorter or longer if there was mutual agreement for whatever reason. Somebody decided to step down or move on or something like that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the 3-year time frame per se. It's just interesting because of election cycles and terms and the limited choices for some councils as to who can serve on these 3-year terms because of, whether or not a person would be serving after 2 years and being reelected, so on and so forth. It just limits the number of choices for these positions.
I don't think it limits the choice at all. Any of the 16 elected members of council and mayors would certainly, any of them would be eligible.
Yes, but if it's a 3-year term, that person would be committed, and then if they're up for reelection in 2 years and that doesn't happen, then you're looking at having to repeat this process.
Yes, it's, if the notion would be that only those that had 3 years left in their term would be appointed. It doesn't have to be that,
No,
but
it
yes,
doesn't have to
you're
be that way. But that was something I noticed when I was reading through it.
Yeah, I'm not
It
sure what
just
that
occurred to
sweet
me.
spot term would be where you would avoid that. I guess you'd have to go short. You'd have to go shorter with the terms in order to avoid that at any time. I don't know.
And
maybe
years
2
ago, it was between Camas and Washougal, they were on a 2-year rotation.
And maybe that's a way to mitigate that concern. I hadn't thought about that specific piece.
Jennifer, do you have other items?
No, not at this time.
Paul?
I have the same concern, Councilman McDaniel, that if you say that you're going to appoint someone to a 3-year term, at some level, it cuts the number of possible appointees on each council in half. And
Again, I don't believe that that's true. I understand and it's up to you all where you go. I understand the notion that if someone is appointed today to a 3-year term that only has 2 years left, they either have to run again and win to retain it, or you make another selection. The same can be true any given day of the week in any year if someone that holds that position resigns. You need to pick another one. So to predispose and say that only a portion of either one of the councils or the elected 8 from either city would, in essence, not really be eligible, I believe is a very erroneous statement.
And along with it, I actually had a question for Councilmember Costin on how the procedure works. I know that you were chair,
Yes.
and the year before you were vice chair.
Correct.
The year that you were vice chair, was that in your second year or your third year on the?
I believe that was my second year, and then third year as chair, and then this year as of past chair.
Yeah, and that was my recollection, and I think that in a lot of public boards that's the procedure, or fairly common, that your first year you really are trying to figure out how to do the job and get through the stack of material. But then people who do that rise to the top in their second year and become vice chair or secretary or something, and then become chair in their third year, and then in the fourth year, the board or the commission really deeply depends upon the experience of that previous president or previous chair. So my own thought, in line with what Councilman McDaniel said, was that you would change the 3 years to 2, and with an automatic extension to 3 or 4, or 3 and 4 year, contingent upon the appointee progressing through board leadership. I think that there's tremendous value in our joint enterprise with Camas, that if we get someone who can be chair of either RTC or CTRAN, that it's very much to our community of interest that we make that possible. So I had the same concerns, Jennifer. And the other one that leaped out at me really is that the final paragraph under 5, a duly representative who fails to accurately reflect the will of his or her constituent councils in compliance with this agreement may be removed by a majority. I think a simple majority of the combined councils is the right answer to that. We are trying to work toward a community of interest here, and if there is no community of interest, we have a way to deal with that with abstention. And on the other hand, someone who, shall we say, takes the ball and runs with it before the signal is called, we need a way to rein that in. That's all.
Molly?
Yes, I actually agree with the 3-year term, and I don't see that it, I really didn't perceive it in terms of elected cycles. For example, I'm on a Community Action Advisory Board, which is a 3-year cycle, and of course they'll be looking for someone to replace me for the remainder of that term. And so I think that's pretty common. And I can speak to RTC, having been on that board for 4 years, is that the issues are complex and there's a vast amount of topics that that board covers. And it does take at least a year to become fluent in transportation language and concepts. And so I think it's important for boards like that to have people who are very well informed and understand the parameters for at least 2 years, instead of having to, in a 2-year cycle, you could have someone who takes a year to learn and is a year of really productive information, and then you have to start it all over again. I think that's too short. And and with regard to the constituent councils, I actually kind of agree with this one. Now, implementing it, it's going to be very difficult because very often you may get an agenda package a week before the meeting, and then to try to get information back from your fellow council members in both cities would be a real challenge. But I do agree that on major topics, and there have been a number of them, that I think it's important that the person who is voting does represent both councils' viewpoints and the majority of viewpoints, and there's got to be a way to do that. So I do agree with that. I know Vancouver does have a policy that's very similar to that. As far as, you know, I mean, I'm not sure that, I like the 2/3 because I don't think it should be easy to pull a representative off those boards just because somebody didn't like the way they voted. And I think it should be something that this actually makes it a serious topic to have a 2/3 vote.
Other council comments? David?
It's that very issue that I disagree with. This is an attempt to move from a representative form of government to a digital democracy where everybody gets to register their opinion, and the representative then must represent the majority of those who voted for it. And I don't think that's what we're trying to do here. I agree with Molly. You acquire expertise in this, in these assignments. And I think that if you appoint somebody, you ought to rely on their judgment. And if you feel you can't do that, then you remove them. And that's easily enough done. And I think 2/3 is a good standard to do that. I agree with Molly on that too. But I don't agree with trying to dictate to a representative how they're going to vote. You sent them there to learn the issues, and now you want to insert the individual council members from 2 cities into their decision process. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that any representative needs to understand the issues and needs to keep in touch with the councils. But to be dependent upon their vote to determine what they're going to vote for, I think is a bad mistake. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find it rather tricky to talk about abstaining, or pre-abstaining, if you will. I mean, telling a representative that they have to abstain from a vote, because votes change as motions are made, and especially if there's any developments from the floor. And I think that's, I mean, we can all understand that there are a couple of issues that some people may have very strong opinions about and may actually take action on the councils, and therefore pressure a representative, if this were in place, to abstain from voting on an issue, whether it's the CRC or whether it's bus service, you name it. And if they're told, no, you already have, you're too much of a firebrand, you can't vote on this, and the vote changes from what the councils have been briefed on, it leaves them in a very uncomfortable position of abstaining from something that they weren't, strictly speaking, prohibited from voting on. I think that takes away valid representation. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about the 2/3 majority. There are 7 members on each council, so that's 14 total votes. Would the person in question be able or eligible to vote on that confidence vote?
I would think so.
On themselves?
This would not preclude it.
Okay. All right, so that's what, 10 out of 14?
10. It's 9.33, so it would require 10.
10 votes,
Right.
okay. Now, I want to talk about the scenarios about the terms for a couple of seconds. I understand, Mr. Mayor, the argument about you're not precluded at all in abstaining from recommending or appointing somebody who has, let's say, even 1 year left on their term. However, I think what the council is voicing tonight is that there could be a strong persuasive argument against appointing somebody who has only 1 year left in their time on the council, or 2 years left if it's a 3-year term. And do you suppose there's any language we could put into the contract that would make it explicit that they don't have to be elected for at least 3 years beyond the time of their appointment in order to be appointed to that position?
I don't think you need any additional language in there at all. It certainly doesn't address or prohibit anybody that has less than that period of time from being eligible. Any member of the elected body is eligible.
As worded, it's silent on that, so anybody could be appointed. We could add language as to intent, either in the preamble or in the body of it, to acknowledge that it's not, the intent of this agreement is to not preclude someone in that situation from serving, if that's helpful, to the
I think that would be a very
palatability
helpful
of the
guide.
document.
The reason I think that would be a very helpful guide is because if there's some guiding language there that tells us that this does not preclude, I mean, maybe a simple sentence at the end of it saying, this does not preclude somebody who has 1 year left as part of their elective term being appointed to this position. If we put that in there explicitly, then future councils will be able to read that and understand our intent tonight, or whenever this does pass.
Other items, Paul?
After listening to council members Coaston and Shoemaker, I'm persuaded that the 2/3 number makes more sense. I'm also persuaded, that I think Councilmember Shoemaker put his finger on something that I was uncomfortable with but hadn't really figured out yet. If you look at the Constitution of the United States, almost everything in there is about limitations on the power of the majority. And also, I think we've gone away from it some recently, but they really did talk about a representative democracy. They really were very much afraid of the kind of public outcry democracy of Athenian Greece, and that they were very much more interested in representative democracy, where you chose people to do a job, and that especially positions like CTRAN or RTC, there is mind-boggling amounts of material to learn and understand and move on. And to think that this council or any council member can, on the basis of 5 or 15 minutes or even 2 weeks of concentrated thought on the subject, come to an expert opinion, I think is maybe specious. So I agree, actually, that I have a problem with forcing them to abstain if there's an absence of agreement between the two councils. We put them there, especially, I think that the ratification becomes more important at that point. And also, the 2/3 majority also. I did have one thought along those lines. Since both mayors are also eligible to be representatives on either CTRAN or RTC, if so appointed, maybe we change that to may be removed by a 2/3 vote of the combined city councils with mayors. That means that there's a total of 16 votes. 2/3 of that is still 11.
It was 10 before, though.
I'm sorry?
It was 10 before for 14.
Right, but it would be 11. So
I would be hesitant on that point. I think,
State code is pretty clear on when the mayor can and can't vote. It's only in case of ties and certain circumstances. I think automatically having a vote probably would comply with state statute.
in addition, I think it's fairly clear in bylaws of both RTC and C-Tran that the governing boards, the governing bodies, the legislative body is the one to make those appointments. And we certainly, my counterpart in Camas and myself are certainly not part of the governing bodies as I believe that they would be defined.
I agree.
Doesn't exclude either of the mayors from being put into those positions if it were deemed acceptable, but in terms of voting on it, I don't believe that would be an appropriate role. Other comments? Molly?
Yeah, a lot of good ideas and thoughts come out tonight. And while I would love to see a recommendation pass, I don't think we're ready for that. The timing is poor since I won't be able to be a part of the discussion and ultimate compromise on how we want to work it. However, if this were happening in, say, November, and we were just going to table this or postpone it till the next meeting, then I would fully be in favor of waiting until we talked through all of the issues, because there are some good ones here. So I guess I would say I don't believe we're ready to vote on this tonight.
Yeah, and you're getting to me to where I intended to get to this evening anyway. David, do you have good notes on the concerns that we've got that were voiced this evening? Yet, let me explain a little bit more the reason that I voted against the motion to table the item. Frankly, I wanted to draw you out and get some comments and get some feedback so that we could go back and not just continue this thing going along, because you're going to be March or April before we finally get all this together and you get to where you need to be. So this is, as Molly said, this is extremely good information, and I don't believe you're there either, and I don't believe even if you took all this into consideration, had a way to so word it and pass something tonight, that it would probably be 100% acceptable to Camas. So given that, I would ask any members who voted in the negative to possibly consider a motion to reconsider the motion to table.
But before we do that, I'd like to move an amendment to strike the second paragraph under 5.
I think you're going to be able to do that under further discussion as it is at a workshop. You're not, I don't believe you're going to approve anything this evening.
Mr. Mayor, since I made the motion, you have to get somebody from the negative side to make the new motion?
Somebody that voted in the negative, which could be yourself.
Since I made the motion to have the mayor sign the proposal, I'll make the motion to table this issue.
Second.
Bring it back at a workshop.
I've got a motion and a second to table the item. Paul, did that answer your?
Actually, what I was hoping to do was make it a little easier on Dave to convey to Camas what it is that we have in our mind.
I don't think we're there yet.
And by making a motion to strike that paragraph, I think we do that. And to strike the word majority and replace it by 2/3 majority, I think we can probably agree on those two. Am I wrong?
Again, I'm not sure that you've got a piece that in total is even close to being able to be moved forward. I'm not so sure that you're not going to settle this out with a joint meeting with the Camas Council.
Right.
And maybe it's a first joint meeting in the new year, and this is one of those topics.
I'm with Molly. I think we need time to digest this thing.
I also believe that Camas, just given the notes and the considerations here, I think we need to, in fairness, let Camas know where some of those things are and I believe they're going to have some additional comment as well. Dave?
I was just going to say, I could see this maybe happening like this, that between now and packet time, if we can, or in time for their meeting on January 3rd for their workshop, we would package up the consensus feedback to their proposed amendments so that they could consider a third draft at their workshop on the 3rd. If they had any further comments or if they were acquiescent to that third draft, they could let us know. We would workshop on the 10th, theoretically finalize at that time in concept that draft, and then both councils could act on it on the Tuesday, January 17th meeting and potentially have made appointments. We could even potentially ask Camas to make their RTC and C-Tran alternate appointments at their meeting on the 3rd, so that they could be ratifying ours on the 17th and we could be ratifying theirs on the 17th. And then I think if there's any RTC or C-Tran board meetings between now and the evening of the 17th, as I mentioned in my email, there is representation. Our communities are represented, so we won't go without representation. And after the vote to table till the next workshop, if it would be your pleasure, it'd be helpful for me, I would like to just kind of iterate what I think I heard in terms of consensus, and then I had one question, but I would wait until after you vote.
Okay, so I've got a motion and a second to basically to table the item to our next workshop. Any other council discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Dave?
Okay, so just kind of walking through the agreement, I don't believe I heard complete consensus on the notion of 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. So I think we'll have to work that out at our workshop. But I will pass along that there was some concerns, and I'll explain the concerns, and perhaps they'll come up with something that would work for us when they meet on the 3rd. It sounded like folks were comfortable with the notion of the ratification.
Not personally. I think I think one of the biggest dangers you have about this is that if the opposite council refuses to ratify, then what are we left with? No representation?
No, the current representation would continue
indefinitely
until you've got
until there's new appointments. So there could be.
Yeah.
Washougal has
indefinitely.
C-Tran say beginning next year, say this was to happen, and in late 14 we received Camus's appointment for the next cycle for C-Tran, and Washougal didn't ratify. Then our representative would continue until such time that there was mutual agreement. This is, I think, what Councilman Russell was pointing to in his question: what happens if there isn't ratification? And it's almost like a Senate confirmation of a judicial appointment. You keep going until you have someone that's appointed, or in that case, the bench is empty and there's an interim, and I forget the administrative process for those interim judges. In our case, it would be just a continuation. So that is a hole in the agreement, in that there is not conflict. There is no conflict resolution around that particular issue. So that there's a possibility that once every 3 years you could be in that sort of a dilemma. Which I think is really why we're even addressing, if you really think about it, that really is why we're doing this. It was that sort of issue, I think, that kind of brought the need for an interlocal agreement, other than the fact that we were anxious for the rotation, I think, just in fairness, that it was time to rotate. But these were the types of issues we were discussing last year. So no specific consensus on that particular item, so potentially some concerns around the implications of it. I heard consensus that the notion of trying to fairly and accurately represent the consensus views of the cities is a fair notion. However, the details here around how that was going to happen, such that you must abstain if there's a disagreement, is where I heard some pretty good consensus that ought to come out, and that we would defer to the judgment of the representative, and then we would resort to potentially the removal process with a supermajority, the 2/3 majority, because it's a serious thing. If a supermajority of the two councils felt that that representation wasn't happening appropriately, and that would be the process. And that's where I had a question, just thinking off the top of my head. Would you be comfortable with some compromise language there, if Camus was interested in it, around the notion that if there is disagreement, that at the least that the representative would articulate some of the dynamics around the different perspectives that were coming from the communities that are being represented, but nonetheless vote according to their best judgment? Or do you want to just be silent completely on that issue and strike?
I think my own view would be silent, but.
Yes, I actually agree that we should probably remove the first part of that sentence, a duly appointed representative who fails to accurately reflect the will of his or her constituent councils, particularly if we're considering striking the paragraph above, because in essence we're saying that we value this representative's vote, not necessarily that they are going to be voting one way or the other per direction. We could say something to the effect of a duly appointed representative only may be removed by a majority or a 2/3 majority vote of the combined city councils.
Yes,
Something
that's an
simple.
excellent point. Yeah, that first sentence becomes moot
It
without the second paragraph.
And then that third sentence, you change that, a duly appointed representative, delete beginning at the word who.
Correct.
Yep, I can
And,
take care of that.
and resuming with the may be removed by.
Okay.
So leave out who fails to accurately reflect the will of his or her constituent councils in compliance with this agreement.
Any other items that Dave needs to note back to Camus? Okay.
So I think in summary, really, it's this supermajority removal, which is the fallback added language that it's the opinion of the council mitigates the concerns, I think, that are reflected by the Camus Council, but just not getting as prescriptive in how to deal with it. There's this fallback removal provision if it really comes down to that. And I think that's the piece that we'll deal with and ask for their input around the term 2, 3, 4 and what their thoughts are on that, and we'll bring it back at the workshop, and we'll let you know what their feedback was on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that should take care of Agenda Bill 16111, at least for the moment. With that, council is going to break for a brief executive session dealing with labor negotiations. I would.
Why don't we let the public speak and make our executive session last?
Okay. Unless there's objection from the council, I think we've got some other items that we need to do this evening as well.
All right.
So let's take a 10-minute executive session. I believe we could probably get it done in that period of time with action to follow, potential action to follow in regards to labor negotiations. Council, if we could go ahead and go downstairs, Mr. Scott, Mr. English, if you could join us, Chief Schumacher, and Mrs. Cefalo, if you could join us. Stay tuned. Okay. Looks like we've got everybody back together at 7:34. We will bring the come back into regular session.
Mr. Mayor,
And-
based on the information that we just received, I'd like to make a proposal to,
Give me 1 second,
excuse me.
if I can. We're going to introduce a new item onto the agenda, which is a contract ratification with the International Association of Firefighters, Local 2444. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, as we just discussed in executive session, the recommended action is to approve the collective bargaining agreement with our IA International Association of Firefighters Local. As requested by the mayor, I'm going to just briefly explain the key points of the agreement prior to your action. This is for a one-year contract that would commence in January and would extend through all of 2012. It makes no adjustment to the salary schedule in terms of any cost of living increase. There's no COLA. Yes, thank you, Councilman. It also provides for increased cost sharing for medical benefits by the members of the local. Specifically, it introduces a 90-10 cost sharing where employees are covered fully and they do not cost share for their own individual insurance coverage, but then for any dependents in their family, there's a 10% cost share for the premiums. With respect to sick leave, there is an increase in the accrual rate of sick leave from 10 hours per month to 16 hours per month. And then there is an adjustment in the number of hours that are worked per, and this is where it gets very complicated for me, but in a Kelly cycle, which is not necessarily a month or a pay period, but it's a scheduling cycle. And we are going to align ourselves with what Camas currently does. And one way to describe this is a number of hours per week. Currently it's 49, and it will be 48 with your ratification of this contract. Each of the provisions that I just described, save the accrual rate on sick leave, is actually a cost savings measure for the city, and we're very grateful to our colleagues on the IAFF for stepping up to the plate, both with the zero COLA and the 90-10 cost sharing for their dependents, and for working through the trial consolidation with the Camas Fire Department. That is where this alignment in the hours worked on the Kelly Day cycles actually will flatten some of the spikes in terms of the numbers of personnel that are off at any one time, and is going to significantly reduce our overtime to the tune of 10 times what it might cost very incrementally for this little change. And I should say that one of the key terms to this agreement is that both from management's perspective with this hours worked piece and from the union's perspective around some of the other items, the key component that made the agreement possible is the trial consolidation and the leveraging and the economies of scale that we are gaining by having a combined force. And so all of the terms are contingent upon our continued good faith work on consolidation, and we're looking favorably at that from an administrative perspective, and we don't see that as a problem at all for 2012. So I'd like to just thank Jeanette and Chief Schumacher for their solid professional work on this particular bargaining, and for the partnership of our IAFF, and the recommended action. And I think actually do we have a motion, is to approve the contract.
So moved.
Rod?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to ratify the contract with the IAFF 2444. Any council discussion? Paul?
I just wanted to make one comment for the public. This Kelly cycle is just one more example of the remarkably complicated, non-intuitive issues that end up crossing these desks and these tables. By decreasing the number of hours worked per week, we end up saving a significant amount of money. Not at all obvious. And the reason is because 49 hours a week doesn't work on a 24-hour day. So you end up with, you're not allowed to have too few people. So sometimes you end up with too many people. And by cutting back to something that's actually divisible, we end up saving a significant amount of money, even though on the face of it, it looks like it would be a decrease it would increase our labor costs. Fascinating.
Any other council comments? Okay, I've got a motion and a second to ratify the contract with the IAFF Local 2444. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And Heather and Martha, I think we've got copies of those for you. And if you want to get with Jeanette and David after the meeting or at some point, they can kind of go through some of those oddities in there that make this a better deal for the city. So, okay, with that, we are to the second point in the agenda for any comments from the public. Yes, Barbara.
It's Barbara Curry, 303 Love Street, Apartment 4. It's kind of like using your telephone and having 5 things to say and forgetting half, and when as soon as you hang up, you think, oh, I should have said. I want to thank the city and the council and whoever was responsible for allowing me to go play for the for the tree lighting. I had a great time, and I think the crowd was wonderful from when the cheering I could hear from back in the tent where we were trying to stay warm. And I had a great time, and everybody that spoke with me said they enjoyed having the music, and I hope to continue the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I bet we will be able to let you do that. You actually stole some of my thunder under the mayor's report, but thank you very much for providing that music. Any other members of the public? Yes, ma'am. Tell you, we never should have started this. Never should have started this.
I'm Ann Gard, the mayor's wife, 4813. I just wanted to tell Molly, Rod, and Michael, having watched you for the past 2 years and the integrity, and I don't always agree with you, Michael, but I will say you stand your ground and you don't change, and that's okay because we don't always all agree. Molly, the integrity, the grace, the gifts you have given to this city are so remarkable. I have enjoyed, and I know we'll be longtime friends, and the heart that you give to the city of Washougal can't be replaced. And Rod, I never knew you had such a great sense of humor. What you give back to the city in knowledge has been incredible. And don't give up on it. We are losing some fabulous people. I'm sure we're gaining some new beginnings, but the experience and the guidance you've given the city of Washougal has been undaunting. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, any other members of the public wishing to address? Mike?
If I don't do this, it comes out all wrong.
Uh-oh. Do I need to turn the timer on?
No, I timed this.
Do I need to turn the timer on?
Go ahead. Hello, Mike Briggs, 2868 West 9th, Washougal. I'm not a long-term resident and citizen of Washougal, only 4 years and counting. But in that time, I could see a community in transition, a community looking to maintain and protect its heritage, but unfortunately also afraid and hesitant to look toward the future for what it might bring, good or bad. To help along this fine community, rich in the natural resources of exquisite beauty and of wonderful people. This community needs a strong and resilient city council to not only make laws, but to represent the community in total and to be wise, even if it's beyond their capabilities. In short, this council must reach beyond itself and to become one with dignity, grace, intelligence, and wisdom. Rod Morris's time with this council, 16 years if I'm correct, I look upon as a solid and consistent element within this council. He possessed such a long history and was so integrated within this community that his tenure was and will prove to be invaluable to this town and social community. I do hope Mr. Morris finds a way to keep up his image and contribution to Washougal. Colston, to me, represented what is good and decent in a person and in a politician. She gave a good example of what an everyday citizen can do if they put others first and always remember to, how does this benefit my community? Molly is what I wish most politicians could or would become. Washougal is losing a lot with Mrs. Colston's departure. Like Rod Morris, I do hope that Molly can find a way to remain visible and viable in our community. I always admired Michael Delvar's single-mindedness, determination, and no one can doubt he has the courage of his convictions. And true to the Flyers code, I feel Mr. Delavar will always have landings he can walk away from. Now is the time we citizens need to give this new Council of Seven the time and patience required to see if they might form a good, productive union for us all to learn from the mistakes and the successes of the good people that worked and struggled before them. And I'll say goodbye to our council and good luck to our new city council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else from the podium? Ms. Terrell.
I would have said that sort of thing too, except I'd end up crying, so I won't do that. The first thing I'm going to say is we cannot hear you. If my church, which has no money, can get little things so people can hear earbuds, or in the T&V they have these little things you wear on the side, but I cannot hear David. I can hear Molly and Paul, and after that, the rest of you, well, Rod too. The rest of you are mumblers, well, anyway, I think you'd get more people coming here if they could hear what was going on. Secondly, I haven't understood the arrangement with the Columbia Gorge, but it says it's a PSA, so they're providing the city with services for which you were paying. Well, they also run around and get all the feral cats and kittens and so forth. Why are you not paying for that?
It's not a program that the city has ever put under our codes and policies. Only dogs, not cats, or any other animals.
They spend a lot of money over at West Hills. Well, maybe you should think about that.
That I can tell you from being on the council in the early 80s, that was a topic of discussion even then.
Well, get with it. You've got some time now. The third subject I want to bring up is much more serious. A couple of years ago, I had a question about CTRAN, and I asked Mrs. Colston what I should do, and she told me that Linda Dietzman was a representative, and I communicated with Mrs. Dietzman, who did not communicate with me. And I just dropped it. Recently, when the election was going, there were all these signs that say Linda Dietzman doesn't respond to her constituents. So my question is, if in some of this agreement that Linda Dietzman ends up being the representative, is there going to be somebody who makes sure that she does whatever it is she's supposed to be doing?
I think it would be fair to say that regardless who the individuals may be, that it is certainly put back on the shoulders of the council and the administrations to make sure that those communications are happening throughout both communities.
Mr. Greenlee has remarked that it takes a lot of time and knowledge and effort to become an effective representative. Is it just the RTC you were referring to, or CTRAN?
Oh, certainly both of them, and actually I think there's some other positions as well.
Well, I'm not convinced, but I'm willing to sit and watch. Anyway, I wish you all a Happy New Year. We will miss you all, and there are new people coming in, and I hope they're enjoying themselves and produce as much as you have. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Marilyn. Any other members of the public wishing to address council? Martha?
I feel like I need one of those hats where I go like this so you know who it is you're talking to when I'm up here. Citizen Martha speaking to you right now. Back in about 2004, I walked into this chamber and saw that face sitting there, and there wasn't anybody here, out here, and sat down as a citizen, curious to see what you all did. And this gentleman said, "Why are you here? What do you want?" And from then on, always answered my questions and gave me lots of information, sat with me when I had questions when I was running for ECFR commissioner for a long time to try to help me understand that culture. So I will miss you and your face up there. I won't, I will see you other places, I'm sure, but there I will miss you tremendously. Believe it or not, Mr. Delavar, I have great respect for you. You are a gentleman, and what you say with all sincerity. And I don't always agree with you. And I'll have to say that I go home after a meeting sometimes and I walk in and I go, "Do you know what that Michael said?" And then I calm down and we talk about it and think it through. And sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't. And I learn. And now I have a copy of the Constitution that I too pack around with me. So see, your influence it's substantial. And so you too will be missed. And Molly, who is my friend. And I love you dearly. And you know that. Saved her for last because I knew this was going to happen. So I am sorry to see you go, but I bet there are grander things on your horizon. So I wish you well. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Martha. Any other members of the public? Okay. Moving to Mayor's report, Barbara has already taken care of my thank yous and a little bit to do with the music at the Christmas tree lighting and parade. I am going to thank you. Thank you very much for what you did. That was an extremely cold evening. Tom, thank you for assisting Barbara as well and helping get things moved around and set up and ready to go. I have no doubt that all of the public that were down there, and it was substantial, were very much appreciative of having the music as well. I didn't know you were going to sing. I thought you were just going to play, but there you were singing too. You said you wanted to. I love it. Thank you very much, Barbara. And with that, I believe we have some recognition items for our outgoing council members as well. Councilman Delavar, if you would meet me down in the front of the chambers. A certificate of appreciation presented to Michael Delavar, City of Washougal, on behalf of its citizens, recognizes your 2 years of outstanding service on the Washougal City Council, presented by the City of Washougal on December 19th, 2011. Also arranged for some gorgeous, I'm not sure what these are. They're not plaques and they're not trophies, so they kind of fall in between there. I'll let somebody come up with a name on there. that actually has the same information as the certificate itself. So, thank you. I think as has been amply said by others this evening, you certainly are an individual who has your convictions, and I'm here to tell you, sitting in the seat that I sit in, it is comforting to know that someone is going to stay in a certain area and not necessarily go back and forth. So you've been someone we can count on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anything you'd like to say?
It's been an honor to serve the citizens and to have an opportunity to voice the opinions that I have. And I do appreciate all the public input. That's one thing that I truly do appreciate is when the members of the public, even if you don't agree with me, do voice your opinion, because it does influence the votes. And I think we always need to have that influence on the council. So thank you very much for being here tonight.
Molly.
Okay.
Certificate of appreciation presented to Molly Poston. The City of Washington, on behalf of its citizens, recognizes your 6 years of outstanding service on the City Council, presented by the City of Washington, December 19th, 2011. And similar or something that I don't know what the name of it is.
Memento.
Oh, it's beautiful.
We're sure you can find somewhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Molly, thank you. I know, obviously, I get an opportunity too many times throughout the week to talk with other electeds and folks throughout the entire county. And I don't believe that there is a board or a group within this county you haven't touched in some way. And I have never heard anything except just high esteem on behalf of anyone who's come in contact with them. And folks that ask how you are if they haven't seen you lately and that type of thing. So you have done this council in the city very, very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Your turn.
And I'll just say it's been my true privilege to serve the citizens of Washougal on the Washougal City Council. I can't say it's always been fun. I mean, we've had some tough times, but it's always been a good learning experience. And you can rest assured that I will not be a stranger to City Hall or the staff. I'll certainly not be a stranger to the larger community. I'll become very active. And in a way, it'll free me from some of the slow pace of legislative action that I've had to adopt as a city councilman. I do love city council because I think that is the real grassroots part of the democratic system. And so it's where democracy really starts, is on this level. So I would certainly urge you all to continue to voice your opinions and make this community a good community, a better community, a strong community, a forward-thinking community, and I'll be right there with you. So thank you very much.
Councilman Moore. A certificate of appreciation presented to Rod Morris, the City of Washougal, on behalf of its citizens, recognizes your 16 years of outstanding service on the City Council, presented by the City of Washougal, December 19th, 2011. And a similar, has anybody come up with a name for these yet? Sure.
Memento.
A shoogie.
Oh, shoogie. Oh.
Let's go with memento. Rod, thank you very much.
I kind of like shoogie.
For those that don't know, Rod and I didn't used to always see eye to eye on a lot of things. I voted for Stacy. And I'm one of those people that's willing to forgive and forget. Rod and I still, every once in a while, still don't agree necessarily on all things, but I can say that we have a great respect for each other. I think we have found a wonderful friendship in each other, and it is nice to be able to debate things back and forth in the way that we have come to do, and I've probably learned much more than you've had benefit of the discussions that we've had, and quite frankly, from where I sit, once in a while we need those kind of discussions to happen. So certainly 16 years is a long time. You bring a lot of institutional knowledge to these chambers, and that in itself is going to be sorely missed.
It's funny that I'm friends with Rose. We bring institutional knowledge to this.
I was asked in 1991 to fill a spot for Ryan Baker's dad, who was resigning at the time. And so I've actually been around City Halls for 20 years, off and on at different times. But the one thing I want to say is that I'm most proud of being a volunteer firefighter for the City of Washougal and helping the citizens in their moment of need. I don't want to retire as a Kamloops firefighter. I want to retire as a Washougal firefighter. But I can't withdraw retirement from the state for volunteers until I'm 65. So I've got 8 more years in the fire department, and I expect to make that the best 8 years I've ever had. I've stayed in conjunction with the fire department. I'm always in the top 5 responders every year for the last almost 34 years, and I'm proud of that. But I want to go back to the thing with the city council. I remember along the way that Mom and Dad would complain when we lived in White Salmon. They just paved the new road, and they went back 2 weeks later and dug a trench in it. So things like that, I've had a chance to make a difference in Washougal. We've done that where we've had houses being built in housing developments that didn't have roads put in. We put in a second layer of asphalt, and we finally put the third one in when we needed it and all the building was done. We've done all kinds of things like that. So I'm very proud of that. But between the fire department and the city council, I've driven around the city with Nettie, and I say, I was in that house last year. We had a heart attack there. I'm part of this subdivision. I got to sign documents that got to be a part of it. When Mayor Guard's brother Jeff was mayor, he was out of town, and I got to sign my name to all the documents for Captain Clark Park. So I'm part of the history of, in pieces of it, and so I'm very proud of that I got to serve with all the citizens. The one thing on council that I hate to say to Karen, the education. It's a huge education that we get sitting here. We can all sit out there, we hear the public talk about what it is that's broke or what's not working right. But even tonight, we had comments made about the calls we've had in the last couple of weeks. You just don't know all the facts. When you sit here, you've got a lot bigger chance to know every finite detail. And there's reasons we make decisions that we do and some that we can't make a decision on because there's rules to play by. So that alone, the education you get here is by far and away the most wonderful thing I've got out of this. The pay isn't great. It's some weeks we put in lots of hours, but it's okay. But the people that I've worked with over 20 years, staff, you guys are the best. You guys have been great to me. You've answered every question. I've been through here with all of you as you came through. So we worked well together, I think. I'm very appreciative of everybody's support. So thank you.
Thank you for indulging us for a few minutes, and if everyone in the chambers would, please rise and give a round of applause. We've got 24 years that are retiring today. Okay, with that, do we have any comments from council members? Paul?
I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed the Christmas event. And thanks to Barbara. I'm sorry my little heater couldn't keep you warmer. It was a great turnout. It was a wonderful event. And thanks to all the staff and to all of the people, all of the citizens who came and who showed up and made it a wonderful event. That's all.
Other council members?
I actually do have a comment, and I hate to put a damper on the festivities. However, I was deeply disturbed when I read the article from December 17th regarding the Mary Jane's House of Glass raid or investigation or whatever you want to call it. I actually have expressed concern in the past about this business, its proximity to an elementary school, and I was actually told that Mary Jane's would be handling the drug paraphernalia only. And then I read in an article that there could possibly be a processing room, and you know, all the accoutrements that go with that sort of thing. I would assume so. I would assume that that would definitely be illegal. And I think that we need to talk about this. I don't know if it's be more appropriate to do it at a workshop or...
Talk about it in regards to?
I realize it's an ongoing investigation, but wouldn't this be a violation of a business license?
I think that review is underway as well. I'm not sure what it is you'd like to talk about at workshop.
I just want to make sure that we're talking about it, whether it's within council or in City Hall. I think it's a concern. I'm just making a comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dave?
Mr. Mayor, can we put on the agenda for sometime in January workshops the topic of E-Verify going down to 0 for contracts?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other items from council members? Okay, just a quick reminder before we get to adjournment, we will not have a meeting next Monday. Our final workshop of the year will not happen, so our next meeting will be January 3rd in these chambers. And just a reminder of our city planning session on Saturday, January 7th, starting at 9 o'clock in the morning in our community center right behind the City Hall building. With that, I would entertain a motion for adjournment. And Molly?
Yes, I would move to adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carried.
I truly did not see that one coming. I'm going to hang on to that one.
I was going to throw that one away. I thought the offense was in Calais County. I thought it was in Calais County.
What do you got for a map there? What's that?
That was our own.
That was actually my question. The complaint, was that in Clark County or against the, what's his name, Stan, the shooter, was the Class A felony complaint, was that in Cowlitz County or in Clark County?
Be there tomorrow?
Okay.